Welcome back to the table. Today, David and I are here to give you a look at an upcoming new game. This one is called Lore from Campfire Games. This is a kind of fantasy game where you're going on what I would call a fantasy adventure, basically.
Yeah, this is a fantasy adventure for sure. It's an action selection game. You have a variety of different things you can do on your turn, but all of those things are the kinds of things you'd expect to see on any fantasy adventure.
Right, and you're playing your own unique character that with your own unique player board that kind of represents one of those. And there are a bunch of different characters you can choose from. These player boards are double-sided. And you're starting off kind of with a quest. You're starting off by going out and fighting monsters, gaining companions, completing events, and all the stuff that you'd kind of expect in what feels kind of like a sandboxy game. Like David said, it is action selection, so there are some moments where you're limited in what actions you can take, but you have a lot of freedom and a lot of different ways to score victory points and a lot of different strategies you can use. For example, you can go out and be a monster hunter and fight a bunch of monsters, or you can go on a bunch of quests and try to complete as many quests as you can. So it is kind of like a point salad situation. When you get to the end of the game, you're realizing that you're scoring points for basically everything that you've done over the course of the game.
Yeah, almost everything for sure. There's a lot of points to be scored. And what you see here on the table, there's a handful of things, so we'll go through this quickly. The main area right here, these are the fields. These are where you're going to be moving throughout your adventure, and depending on what field you're in is going to have some impact on sort of the enhancements of your abilities, the things that you might be able to do. Some of them might be tied to events, and you can find an event at the beginning of your turn. But all these fields also have a stack of quest cards attached to them so that you can see what the next quest is if you're in that field and you take the quest action.
Yeah, managing which field you're in at which time is a huge part of the game. It's a huge part of the strategy is timing where you are when you're taking specific actions. Because as you see over here, there's the time of day track. You're going to play through 4 moments of the day. You've got your dawn, you've got your daytime, your dusk, and then your nighttime. And you're going to see those symbols both on your player board and on some of these fields. Now, when you're in a location that matches, if the field matches the correct time of day, that means that an event could happen in that particular location. So you want to kind of move across these locations so that you can draw event cards. Event cards come in a wide variety of things. You've got characters that can help you out. You've got some enchantments you can use, some different situations you can find yourself in. Of course, all kind of within that fantasy theme. They give you some special abilities, some powers, some triggers. There's a lot of different things mixed into those event cards. So timing them is widely important, I would say.
Yeah, but although they do feel a little bit different than I think a lot of event cards you might expect in other games. You don't just draw these and a thing happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes that might, but oftentimes you're taking those event cards, placing them below your player board, and then using them when the time is right. So you do have some control over when those are going to happen for you, but they're pretty important. And there's a lot of other things that's going to dictate where you want to be and why. But if you find yourself in the right position at the beginning of your turn, you can get another event card, which is pretty important. The other impact that some of these auras, is I think what they call them, are going to have is on the monster itself too. You can fight the monster no matter where you're at, and there's always one face-up monster, but it too has one of those times of days attached to it, which is going to make it potentially stronger.
Yeah, if you fight a monster at a particular time of day, it gets a bonus, and your player board, like I said, has aura symbols as well. If you fight a monster during that time of day, you're just better. Plus, if you are searching for treasure, which is another thing you can do at the right time of day, you get to roll more treasure dice than normal. So all of that kind of ties into the different time of day. So if you can kind of match it so that you're in the right location at the right time of day, you could get an event, you could get bonus to your treasure, you could fight the monster when it's weakest or when you're strongest. All of that is determined by which board you're on at a certain time of day, but also you'll see these different sets of symbols at the bottom of each field. That's going to interact with these ability cards, and you're going to be able to collect these ability cards over the course of the game. You can fit 3 ability cards on your player board, and you're going to notice that every ability card has a symbol on it in the corner, and you're going to notice that each one of those icons is present on some of these boards or others. Effectively, that's telling you if your ability card is going to be active in that field. So that's a huge thing you need to be aware of as you're choosing if you're going to move every turn or trying to plan ahead where you're going to be. You really want to look at these symbols and make sure that they match and make sure that your action is going to be able to be taken at that particular location.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because obviously those ability cards have abilities on them. And that's going to be one of the variables that you're considering when you take them. But like Ryan said, I felt it was almost more important for the game we played to make sure you could go, okay, I'm going to like be great at fighting or great at whatever I'm doing with my abilities in the Sky Kingdom. So if I had cards that had these swords or attack icons in these colors, I knew that all three of those abilities were going to be active. And that plays a significant role, not only for the abilities themselves, but that's also going to have a role in your power during combat.
Yeah, one of the main ways to score victory points is to fight monsters. You can get rewards for fighting monsters, which come in the form of other actions. You get treasure, you get gems, and a renown, which scores you points. There's a lot of things you can get for fighting monsters. But in order to fight monsters, you kind of have to do a lot of other stuff to collect things like those ability cards. You could collect some companions, which give you bonus strength. You could go hunting for treasure, which might give you some of these relics, which add to your combat. So there's a lot of things that go into your combat, but one of the main things are your traits themselves. You've got 3 traits possible that you can use in combat. You have your red, green, and your blue, which represent different things of your characters. However, when you go into combat, you're going to roll a die to determine which one of your traits is active. And then you're going to look at all of your abilities and you're going to multiply those things together. So like David said, if you're in a spot where you know you've got 3 abilities that are active in that particular location, David might stay in the Sky Kingdom to fight monsters, even if it's not the right time of day, even if it's not the right aura, because he knows he's getting that multiplier. And you can have 3 ability cards if they're all active, and your traits can get up to 7, so you can pretty easily beat some of these monsters, again, if you plan for it correctly.
Yeah, and it's not just one monster deck, by the way. There is one for day 1, day 2, and day 3, so they are going to get progressively more challenging. The rewards, I don't know if the rewards get any particularly much better.
The victory points do, at least.
The victory points get better, but they're more challenging. So as your traits go up, you're going to need those traits to go up so that you can get that, and you're going to need some of those abilities so that you can interact on that level. The one thing that we haven't dug into at all yet is the namesake of the game, and that is the lore. The lore board is right here, and the lore cards are face down here. This is kind of an interesting thing because they're also abilities for players, but they're contingent upon how much you personally have interacted with the lore board.
Each of these lore cards takes 2 actions to complete. The first time you do a lore action, or any player does a lore action, they're going to take that card and place it face down, potentially covering up a blank spot or covering up an active ability and turning that active ability off. Every time you contribute to a lore card, you're going to place one of your cubes down there to mark that you contribute to that card. The next player that takes that action, which could be you or another player, is going to flip it, and they're going to place their cube there as well. So in a 4-player game, only 2 people can contribute to 2 cards, or to the card. And if that card is active, if it's flipped face up, it's an ability that only those players that helped contribute to it will get. And that can really hurt the 3rd and 4th player. So this is kind of a race to try to get those, but it's not that big of a deal because you're always going to be able to add to that. And this doesn't matter where you are, what time of day it is, or whatever. As long as you're taking that action, you're contributing to the overall story of the game by adding these new lore cards. And you kind of see the little comic on one side, and then of course on the back, it kind of shows the summation of that, the final epic of that lore. So this is a great way to score points because if you've contributed to these cards, you're getting points, either 7 for doing it by yourself or splitting it if you have another player that helped you.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the timing there, because you can do some things and you can find some actions where you might not effectively figure they'd be. Obviously, there's actions on the action cards that you're taking, but there's other things that you can do that might give you additional actions. Another thing we haven't really touched on are companions. You can have 1 companion, and those will often have an ongoing ability, but at the end of your turn, you might also be able to dismiss them to get some benefit. And oftentimes, and sometimes, that benefit might be even to take a lore action. So when you take that lore action, if you'd already taken it that turn, and then you dismiss the companion, you're able to put 2 cubes and not only have just sole control of that card and its ability, but all those points.
Yeah, and those action cards are all listed here. Like David was just saying, there's so many different ways to combo. There's so many other ways to find actions, and I think that's a core part of the game too, not just matching the timing, but also when you're taking those bonuses. And of course, you are getting some of those bonuses from event cards and the companion cards, but also from these quests. Every time you take a quest, you're immediately getting some kind of reward just for going on that quest, and that reward could be an action.
Yeah, the reward that you take when you take a quest is up in the right-hand corner, and then you're going to get points for completing that quest. But to complete that quest, down in the lower left-hand corner, there is a staged thing that you have to do. It could be 2 things, it could be 3 things, but you have to do them from left to right. This one here, which is Protect the Village, starts with interacting with a situation or an enchantment. Those are often going to be keywords on some of the things that you have on those event cards below your board. So you might be able to do that, and you could just mark that by placing a cube there. Then the only other thing I have to do is duel with a monster. Once I've dueled with a monster, again, whether I am successful or not, I can complete this card, I remove the cubes, and I've completed that quest. You can have 2 quests at any given time, and then once you've removed one, you have a space to take another quest, which is another one of the actions you can take.
Of course, those quests are all going to be worth victory points at the end of the game, and each one of these fields has a particular reward you're going to get. If you defeat a monster there, if you defeat a quest there, you get that particular reward. A lot of that is gems, which you're going to need to spend to buy ability cards. Sometimes it's going to give you renown. Renown is a stat that's not really used in combat, but the higher your renown at the end of the game, the more points you're going to get. So it's just yet another way to get points. And then also, you can do co-op cards or teamwork cards. Particular events that are helpful can sometimes be played on other players. You're giving them a little bit of a boost, you're benefiting them, but then you're getting a reward as well. So there's interaction between players in those cards that are used to help other people. And also, those can be used to complete quests as well sometimes. So again, completing quests is a great way to score points. Getting those monsters is a great way to score points. Completing the lore cards is a great way to score points. Getting your renown up is a way to score points. You're collecting gems over the course of the game, whether through taking specific actions that have you rolling dice to collect gems or potentially relics, which are also worth points. So as you can see, that really is kind of that sandbox feel
a little
that
bit
goes into it.
It's definitely a point salad-y sandbox with a lot of points to be gotten from different sources, and a lot of, like we said right from the start, a lot of adventure-y sort of feel to this. That's the one last thing I want to mention. If you haven't noticed already, the artwork and the graphic design on this
phenomenal.
game is really, really nice. All these cards, in fact, we haven't looked through all of them, but I haven't seen any repeat art on any of the quest arts.
And these lore cards have phenomenal art.
The event cards. A lot of this stuff has very unique stuff, and the art style is absolutely beautiful. So it kind of really kind of puts you in that setting of going on a nice fantasy adventure.
Well, it definitely does. And at the end of the game, which again, you're going to play 3 days. So this track is going to have each time a day is going to be done 3 times. Which again, the actions are kind of tight, so you do want to find all those bonus actions as you can. But once you're fully done, you actually have this nice little collection of the quests that you went on, the characters you interacted with on the way, the companions that you met, the events that you triggered. So it does come together, and you have a very unique fantasy story. Even though there's not really a narrative element in the game, you do kind of feel that organic story coming out as you take those actions.
Yeah, and you know what? You could lean into that if you wanted
For sure.
to. There's a lot of flavor on these cards. If not narrative, there's enough flavor to basically, if you want to say, this is what I did. I defeated the Manticore after a grueling battle. Go ahead, lean into it. The game definitely lends itself to that.
Yeah, so this is Lore. This game is on crowdfunding right now, so take a look at the crowdfunding page below to see all the other components. There's a bunch of stuff that we're not showing here. There's other boards you can play.
Yeah.
There's a ton of different characters. There's a ton of different lore cards. So you're going to be having a pretty unique game every time you play that. So please let us know in the comments if you have any questions. We'll do our best to answer them. Hopefully the designer might be in to answer some questions as well. And as always, you can jump into our Discord and reach us there, and we'll be talking about this game and other games. So thank you so much for watching, and until we see you again, keep having fun at the table.